Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Tuesday everybody. The second plenum of the 20th Party Central Commission for Discipline Inspection is currently underway in Beijing. The entire standing committee is attending the event. The communique for this plenum should be out later this week. If there is anything particularly important or interesting which comes from the meeting, we will cover it then. But for today's video, let's begin with the economy. After a horrible 2022 for the PRC economy, we are anticipating a rebound of types in 2023, and we are now starting to see the first signs of this. This year's Spring Festival travel rush has officially begun, with the first day, that is last Saturday, seeing passenger traffic nationally surge almost 39% year on year. That is according to data from the State Council. This is promising news for the economy as it shows households feel more comfortable to travel and spend money. During the zero-COVID era, important holidays saw crashes in traveller numbers. However, we should manage expectations. While the travel numbers are good compared to the zero-COVID years, the number, 34.7 million passengers on Saturday, represents a 48% drop from the first day of the travel rush before the pandemic in 2019. Indeed, the government itself admits that it will take some time for activity to return to pre-pandemic levels. At a press conference last Friday, China's Vice Minister of Transportation said that while his ministry expects total passenger trips during the 40-day travel period to double year on year to 2.1 billion, this is still only equivalent to 70.3% of the passenger trips made during the same period in 2019. The best performing region in terms of relative traveller numbers is expected to be the Yangtze River Delta. We remember that this area includes Shanghai, Zhejiang, Jiangsu, and to some, Anhui, with numbers at 80% of the pre-pandemic levels. Meanwhile, in another sign of rebound versus 2022, Beijing has issued a decent quota for crude oil imports, permitting a total of 111.82 million metric tons of imports for 44 non-state-owned refiners and traders in the latest batch, writes UK-based Japanese-owned Financial Times, citing traders with knowledge of the matter. Year-to-date, China's issued crude imports quota is also 30% higher than the same period last year. Bloomberg writes today that China's oil demand is forecast to register meaningful growth for the second quarter, quote, as COVID infections begin to wane in bigger cities and as mobility returns to normal levels, end quote. Some in the market are feeling optimistic too. On Monday, yesterday, Goldman Sachs strategists wrote in a note to clients that the brokerage has issued its 12-month index target for the so-called Morgan Stanley Capital International China Index to 80 from 70. Citing low valuations and multiple pro-growth policy changes in areas like housing, internet regulation and geopolitics. All of these, of course, we've been following closely. It seems that the China Update audience is far ahead of Goldman Sachs' clients. As we have explored in previous videos, part of the economic rebound this year will be fueled by debt-financed government spending. We are seeing signs of this too. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin writes today that 18 Chinese provinces and municipalities unveiled plans to sell more than 1 trillion yuan, $146 billion of local government bonds during the first quarter, quote, as authorities step up spending to bolster the economy, end quote. Almost 90% of this funding will be through special purpose bonds, a financing mechanism which we have explored in previous videos. Quickly, we remember that special purpose bonds are extra budgetary debt instruments issued by local governments that are typically used to fund infrastructure projects and whose debt, in principle, can be repaid from the cash flow they generate. But in practice, as we have discussed in previous videos, this isn't always the case, especially over the last 5 years or so. We anticipated this borrowing surge from governments. In December at the Central Economic Work Conference, Beijing pledged more fiscal support this year. 2 weeks ago, former Finance Minister Liu Jiwei called for permitting bigger government deficits in 2023, and last week the current Finance Minister, Liu Kun, said that the government needs to expand fiscal spending, including through the greater use of special purpose bonds. It's reported this week by multiple outlets that Beijing is discussing a special local government bond quota of up to 3.8 trillion yuan, $560 billion, higher than the previous record of 3.75 trillion yuan, and a deficit target of around 3% of GDP for 2023, higher than last year's goal of 2.8%. Analysts warn, as we have been following for multiple years now, that many local governments are undergoing fiscal strain, with some debt burdens, especially in poorer regions, already crossing red lines. According to the Ministry of Finance, as of the end of October 2022, outstanding special purpose bonds, which we remember are on top of regular debt, reached over 20 trillion RMB, over $3 trillion US. Quote, during the first 9 months of 2022, interest payments on the debts totaled 479 billion yuan, up 26.9% year-on-year. The finance minister last week also vowed to prevent systemic risks from government debt. End quote. Next up, the so-called Wolf Warrior number 1, Zhao Lijian, has been reassigned. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the episode, as always, don't forget to hit that like button if you have not subscribed, and again, you enjoy this sort of content, you want to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on China when it's released, maybe consider subscribing and hit that bell notification. And anyone who wants to go that extra mile and be part of the community that helps keep this channel sustainable and free on YouTube every day, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. I primarily rely on you guys for this support. So for those who do give that support and all kinds of support, as always, a very big thank you. I deeply appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Outspoken senior diplomat and Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian has been named Deputy Director of the Department of Boundary and Ocean Affairs, a curious reassignment which some analysts have called a lateral demotion. Zhao had actually not been at the podium of the Foreign Ministry press conference for some time already, with his last appearance being the 2nd of December. Of course, Zhao Lijian, to many, has been the face of China's more assertive, even at times aggressive, diplomatic style, pejoratively referred to by some commentators as wolf warrior diplomacy. Some of the senior diplomat's more notable episodes include pushing the idea in the early days of the pandemic that COVID had been introduced to Wuhan by the US Army, and tweeting a digital illustration of an Australian soldier with a large Australian flag preparing to slit the throat of an Afghan child. Some commentators, perhaps prematurely, argue that Zhao's reassignment, which comes after China's ambassador to the United States, Qin Gang, left his role to become foreign minister, is yet another sign that Beijing is planning to adopt a softer touch in its diplomatic style. Other commentators, however, counsel caution against jumping to such a conclusion. Quote, the timing is interesting, but wolf warriorism appears to be a fundamental tenet of Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy. And while Zhao is one of the cruder mouthpieces, there is no evidence so far of any shift away from the underlying plank of Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy. As I discussed previously, Zhao Lijian's wife made a big fuss for him through her Weibo account. She may have done so again in late December when she posted about Zhao having COVID and not being able to get medicine. It would be nice if his demotion is a sign of a more substantive shift, but we need to see a lot more before concluding something more meaningful is underway. End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will see you all tomorrow.